Since repeal of Prohibition, there hasn't been a single incident where an executive at Bacardi has had an executive at Seagram's whacked.
Yeah, exactly.
They just don't do it. They sue each other like civilized people.
Free Talk Live.
The AFP reporting on the El Chapo trial, which I have not actually been following at all. I don't know if either of you two have been, but are you familiar with who El Chapo is?
He's a drug dealer in Mexico, right?
Yeah, he was in Mexico. He is now facing trial in, apparently, Manhattan, in New York City. Federal charges over the space of nearly 3 months. A New York jury has heard 54 witnesses deliver dramatic evidence against accused Mexican drug boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, former associates, ex-employees, and a one-time mistress, most of them now inmates in American prisons, have drawn a blood-soaked picture of the Sinaloa cartel, of which El Chapo was co-leader for 25 years, confirming that violent TV series like Narcos about notorious drug trafficker Pablo Escobar have not strayed far from the truth. According to the witnesses, the Sinaloa cartel flooded the United States with cocaine with the blessings of countless police, military officers, and Mexican officials, going all the way up to the president, who turned their heads in exchange for bribes worth millions. The prosecution lawyers in New York, having shown a stark spotlight on the powerful cartel, are close to wrapping up their case. The question now is whether the defense can introduce sufficient doubt to save El Chapo from conviction and a likely life sentence. And remember, El Chapo was the guy who had a tunnel that was dug underneath the prison that he was in Mexico. And his drug gang, or whoever it was that he had do this, they successfully broke him out of prison. Not only did he break out of prison once successfully, he's broken out of prison twice successfully. So, I mean, it's a pretty big feat to be able to break out of prison one time in your life. But this guy managed to do it 2 times. Unfortunately for him, they did end up catching up with him, and now he's facing trial. With the help of Christian Rodriguez, a Colombian who was El Chapo's communications chief, U.S. government agents intercepted some 200 conversations between the cartel boss and his associates, hired killers, and corrupt Mexican officials. Investigators also intercepted encrypted messages between El Chapo and others sent on BlackBerries that the trafficker used to spy on his associates and his mistresses. In one message read to the jury, El Chapo speaks with an associate and former mistress known as La Fiera about setting up dummy corporations in Germany and Ecuador in order to export drugs to Europe, Canada, Australia, and the United States. They also discussed the purchase in Belize of 700 kilograms of cocaine. Pedro Flores, Chicago-based trafficker, testified he and his twin brother had received 38 tons of cocaine from El Chapo and from the cartel's other boss, Ismael Zambeda El Mayo, is what he's called, between 2005 and 2008, along with 200 kilos of heroin. So this is it, Rich. They've busted El Chapo. It's over. The war on drugs, they've won. Cocaine, it's never going to come into America. They've busted all of his associates, so done deal, right?
You can manage a business from jail.
What are you saying there, Rich? You saying that it's not going to last, it's not going to make a difference, not going to make a dent?
There's always going to be another. If another person doesn't come and deliver cocaine at the current price, the price will rise until somebody does.
Yeah, that's true, because the market is based on demand and supply. So, if there's a demand, somebody's going to supply it.
Yeah, it's inelastic demand, the ultimate in inelastic demand.
So when you say inelastic, you mean it can't go down over time?
It doesn't change with the price. Elastic demand,
the demand
changes
really
more
steep.
with the price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't know that cocaine
Vertical.
is that inelastic. That would surprise me. Like you would probably do some other drug if you couldn't get cocaine at a reasonable price. And then there's still the issue of, okay, if cocaine is $100 a gram and you just can't come up with that, it doesn't really matter how much you want it.
Well, that's why people commit robberies and things like that.
Yeah, but you can still only steal so much.
Well, you can only steal so much, but that's how that's how addiction is characterized, by a vertical demand curve, which means that you'll do whatever you possibly can to do it, and if the price goes up, generally you will you will pay more. It's true that you can substitute drugs for drugs, but when somebody's a cocaine addict, you you can't just give them some other drug and say, wow, they'll be just as happy.
It's not going to satisfy them.
Exactly. If you take heroin and you're addicted to cocaine, it will reduce the discomfort, but it doesn't satisfy the craving.
It's an interesting story because it touches on some of the highlights of this man's career. I mean, 25-year career as one of the bosses in the Sinaloa cartel. It's an interesting look into, the reality of what it's like to be in this drug trade at the criminal gang, level. Pedro Flores, again, testified he'd received 38 tons of cocaine along with 200 kilos of heroin between just 3 years. He said he sold it all in the United States. The cocaine he sold for as much as $800 million and the heroin for $10 million. After surrendering to American agents, the brothers secretly taped dozens of conversations with El Chapo. In one of them, in 2008, Pedro Flores negotiated with El Chapo over the price of 20 kilos of cocaine. His accountant, the brother to El Mayo and the cartel boss in Mexico City, told the jury how El Chapo purchased Colombian cocaine for $3,000 a kilo, then sold it in New York for $35,000 a kilo.
Snitches get stitches.
A markup of more than 10 times the cost. Now, of course, Rich...
Because he has no other expenses, right? He just teleports himself to New York with the cocaine. Doesn't have to spend gas, doesn't have to spend security, doesn't have to spend bags, doesn't have to spend storage.
Oh, yeah.
He just has no expenses. So it's just 10%, 100%, whatever.
Well, 10x.
Profit. No.
It's a big profit. I mean, there's obviously there's nothing wrong with making a profit, and the reason why people make profits on the drug trade that are seeming excessive is because there are very high risk involved. If you're risking prison for the rest of your life, which he is, then he's got to make it worth his while. Now, of course, in this case, could it have been done for less? Yeah, of course it could have been done for less. But everybody in the drug trade is trying to make good money. So even though there is competition for price at some level, there's still a solid padding in there for anybody who's participating, basically.
Yeah, and Milton Friedman points out that the role of the government in this is protection for the cartel. And when I say protection, I don't mean protection from other threats. I mean protection from competition.
Right.
If the government keeps the competition out of the way, the prices are going to be high. And that's true if you're talking cocaine or chemotherapy. Because the government does the same thing for the AMA cartel.
Right, and there was, I don't think it's in this particular story, but I had heard that they were talking about how they were doing smuggling in some of this court testimony, and they were just saying rather than digging under a wall or digging under the border or doing some sort of ridiculous exercise, they would just load it up in trucks and truck it across. Now, I presume that also means they were paying off border guards. Because if obviously you don't want a whole truck full of cocaine to get busted at the border, so the ideal way to deal with that is to get some border guards on the take. We're talking about El Chapo. He is facing apparently quite a bit of time in prison. I suspect the rest of his life because he's not a young man. El Chapo is currently, actually, I don't know if they even say it in this article. I don't know how old he is, but he's not a young man. Anyway, he's facing trial in New York, and it's been going on for nearly 3 months. And honestly, I have not been following this at all. I just recently heard that it was happening. We followed the El Chapo case when he was released from prison, not by the prison's choice, but because somebody tunneled underneath it and broke him out.
Well, that's not being released from prison. That's
true.
Escaping from prison.
Anyway, amazing story. I'm sure this guy is an absolute thug criminal because, while I want to see the war on drugs end and I want to see drugs legalized, I want to see people being able to purchase any kind of product that they want to and put it in their body if that's what they choose to do. I do understand that in order to be the head of a cartel, you probably have to be a pretty brutal kind of dude.
Well, when Mexico sends people to cartel school, they don't send their best.
So you can bring up whatever you want here if you want to jump in on the discussion about prohibition and some of the things that it creates, which one of the things prohibition creates besides police corruption is drug thugs, these criminal gang members who are, in some cases, shooting up innocents in the streets, usually on accident, but as kind of a side effect, if you will, of fighting out over territory and things like that. So it's incredibly dangerous business to get into, and it doesn't have to be that way if they would just legalize it, because you don't see Pfizer having shootouts with Merck. They're not doing that. They're just competing openly in a marketplace where they don't have to fight viciously and brutally over territory.
Since repeal of prohibition, there hasn't been a single incident where an executive at Bacardi has had an executive at Seagram's whacked.
Yeah, exactly.
They just don't do it. They sue each other like civilized people.
We were talking about El Chapo. There's kind of a brief overview piece of what has been a 3-month-long trial, apparently, according to the AFP, for one of the most notorious drug gangsters on the planet. Lots of people have heard of Pablo Escobar. Well, this is kind of the next Pablo Escobar, and he's currently facing many felony charges. It doesn't say here in this piece how many years in prison he's facing, but I'm going to guess it's the rest of his life, because he is not a nice man, and helped to run the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico for 25 years. He was the co-leader of that cartel. He's been testified against by what appear to be many former associates who are now inmates in American prisons. So they all
that
went
was
down.
not smart, y'all.
What do you mean?
I would not testify against him.
You're suggesting he's gonna get to them in the prison.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be him. He has people,
Right. He's going to have his people get to them in the prison. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It can happen. Yeah.
It's probable at this point. I mean, he has this huge empire.
Right, and as you pointed out, you can run some of this business from inside a prison. You just have to either use code words on the phone or get a cell phone smuggled to you by a corrupt guard.
Maybe even that, because as a prison guard, just like a regular prison guard who's maybe middle class at best, making $15 an hour, if you're lucky, it might be closer to 10 or 5. You go right on this guy? I'm not.
No, but are you going to help him? Are you going to help him? Are you going to smuggle a phone to him?
If he tells me to bring him a phone, I think he's getting a phone. Like...
According to witnesses, they're talking about some of the large number of pounds, hundreds and hundreds of kilograms of heroin and cocaine and other things brought over just a period of a few years to America. After surrendering to American agents, the brothers, he had a couple brothers he was working with, secretly taped dozens of conversations with El Chapo. So they got busted, and then the feds flipped them on El Chapo, and they kept acting as though they hadn't been busted and recorded a bunch of conversations. Let's see here. Going on, it says that his pilot and business manager, Miguel Angel Gordo Martinez, testified that the cartel boss would sometimes receive as many as 3 cash-filled airplanes from the United States on a single day. Each plane carried $8 to $10 million. He also told how El Chapo worked with Colombian suppliers to finance deliveries of up to 14 tons of cocaine transported by boat to international waters off of Mexico, where Colombian crews would transfer the drug to El Chapo's employees. Martinez estimated that from 1990 to 1993, El Chapo thus imported 25 to 30 tons of cocaine into Mexico each year. So just thinking about, the amount of money that this guy was pulling in, $8 to $10 million loaded in a plane, getting up to 3 of these planes in one day. You always have to wonder, and of course they've addressed some of this in some of the movies about drug smuggling. You remember the one with Johnny Depp, where he was the airline marijuana smuggler or whatever it was. I forget the dude's name. I think damn it, now I'm spacing on the movie's name as well. It was like a one-name movie with Johnny Depp in it. I'm sure somebody's going to be shouting it in the chat room over at discord.lrn.fm. But anyway, in that movie, one of the problems is dealing with all the cash, dealing with all of the money. They addressed this in the the television program Breaking Bad as well, where he just starts making so much money. Storing the money becomes a challenge. It becomes a real problem.
And they didn't have cryptocurrency.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct. They didn't have cryptocurrency. But even so, if you're getting $8 to $10 million in cash, it's not easy to just flip that into crypto either.
You're not going to feed that through an ATM. And if you try to feed it through Coinbase, they're going to narc on you.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't go through any kind of official channels in those cases. But you're right. Oh, Blow. Thank you, Baraka66. That was the name of the movie with Johnny Depp, was Blow. And so, yeah, what do you do with all this money? And, of course, once you start getting into the millions of dollars, into the $10 million income in one day, you talk about a month? I mean, who knows what kind of money we're talking about here with this guy, but it's likely hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars coming in. You have to ask yourself, at what point, why doesn't somebody like that just retire? Is it because you can't retire? Is it because,
I think there's some
I would
of that
say
going
that's
on.
certainly part of it. I mean, once you've got that money, you need to have the security, and you need to keep paying for the security. So, I think that is part of it. Where if these guys retired, they would have some serious issues. Also, I mean, I would imagine from their point of view, they're having a lot of fun.
Sure.
I mean, you can do things as a gangster that you just can't
Yeah,
normally
that might
do.
be true when you're 20, 30, maybe 40. I think that starts to be less true when you're 60, 70.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about
I don't
buying women in fast cars, you can still do that at 60 and 70.
Right, but you have running from the cops at that age. Running from the cops at any age is not fun. But at some point, you can't run.
Sure. I mean, somebody like that isn't doing a whole lot of running. He's just doing the ordering. He's ordering his lieutenants and his, foot soldiers to go and do the work.
Yeah, but you still have to.
Well, when you're
set
escaping
everything up
prison, you have to do the running yourself.
That's true. Well, in that case, I think they said that they had a motorbike for him. So they dug the tunnel underneath the prison, and when he got out, he was in the tunnel, there was I believe there was some sort of transportation there.
Oh, wow.
So
at least
didn't
it wasn't a motorized wheelchair.
Yeah. He told let's see. So again, they keep just running through some of these numbers here with tons and tons and hundreds of pounds of cocaine and such. Isaias Valdez Rios, described as a hired killer for El Chapo, testified he saw the drug king torture and execute 3 rival drug traffickers, burying one of them alive. 2 others had bones broken before being killed. Their bodies were burned. While El Chapo has not been directly accused of murder, the hired killer's testimony, the bloodiest and most macabre heard in the case so far, could help seal his fate. Other witnesses said they had seen El Chapo order kidnappings and killings of rivals or of police who refused to accept bribes. They said El Chapo had a permanent security guard of perhaps, here you go, Rich, 100 security agents. So that's how many people he was paying to protect him.
Yeah.
Armed with pistols, automatic arms, bazookas, grenades, and rocket launchers, according to the story. So, I mean, this is one bad mofo. And now he's facing, I don't know how many years in prison, but once again, talking about the war on drugs and how it needs to absolutely end, because you can put El Chapo behind bars, but he's got people, and they've got people, and even though they've busted, what sounds like over a dozen people, all these people testifying against him were busted before they busted El Chapo. So they've definitely, done some damage to this particular cartel, but as you pointed out earlier, Rich, that's just going to help the other cartel. You take out the Sinaloas. What's the other one? The Zetas, I think, is another name down south.
Yeah, and then there are the 100 drug cartels you've never heard of yet.
Right, that would love to rise to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the big banks during the bailouts. They said, oh, no, we can't let the big banks go bankrupt. That would be disaster for the system. Well, no, medium-sized banks will become big banks because they'll start making more money.
The money's got to go somewhere.
The money's got to go somewhere. Somebody's got to provide the services.
Yeah, and the same thing is true in this war on drugs. I mean, even Trump acknowledged it last year when he talked about the reason why he didn't want the wall to actually be a wall, and that he wanted it to be a fence so you could see through it. The reason he gave was because we don't want anybody getting hit by a 60-pound brick of drugs that's being chucked across in a catapult. So the idea was make the wall see-through, essentially a fence, so people wouldn't get hit by drugs flying over the wall. So Trump seems to have some awareness of the futility of the war on drugs, even though he is obviously continuing to prosecute it the whole time.
I don't understand that double think.
Yeah. Well, he's got to make his police buddies happy for whatever reason. He's even though at the same time he also froze the government's funding for a record number of weeks, 5 weeks, and that affected
he just
the entire.
He just wanted to break a record.
I think he did. It affected the entire Department of Justice, though. So the FBI, all these policing agencies, Department of Prisons or Bureau of Prisons, they all went without pay for 5 weeks. From the New York Times, apparently the prosecution has rested in the El Chapo case as of today after calling 56 witnesses against him over 3 months of hearings and testimony. Can you imagine how awful it must be to be on this jury? You've been taken away from your life for 3 months, whatever it was that you did as a career.
Your bills are 3 months late. You're probably fired.
Yeah, I guess they probably don't pay you very much, do they?
They pay you. They say they pay you like $10 a day or something dumb.
Yeah. How the hell are you supposed to deal with that?
I mean, because usually you're only in there for like 2 days.
Yeah. In this case, 3 months of these people's lives has been spent.
And you're probably sequestered in a case like that.
Yeah, because there's risks to the jury.
Which means that you're locked in a hotel room, they take away your cell phone, they cut off the internet, and you're not allowed to talk to anybody.
Yep. It's awful.
So you're locked in a hotel room with no internet and no TV.
Yeah. You're in prison.
Yeah.
It's worse than some prisons in that case. Because in some prisons, you can actually have a television.
Yeah, you get phone calls in prison.
You can have a newspaper.
You can even have a cell phone if you can fit it in your butt.
But again, from this New York Times piece, just to kind of give you a different perspective on the trial, it says that it was something like a Dickens novel. Mr. Guzman, which is El Chapo's last name, was confronted by an endless stream of figures from his past: his chief Colombian cocaine supplier, his top American distributor, the son of his partner and heir apparent to his empire, one of his personal secretaries, the 5'4", 20-something IT expert who built his encrypted cell phone network, and the much younger mistress with whom he escaped from the Mexican Marines naked through a tunnel dug beneath a bathtub in his safe house. As if that weren't enough, prosecutors also called to the stand several law enforcement and forensic experts, among them an Ecuadorian prosecutor, members of the Colombian National Police, a military officer from the Dominican Republic, and various agents from the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security investigations. There was a fourth-generation handwriting analyst whose great-grandfather had worked on the Charles Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. This sounds like an expensive trial. They spent, according to this article, over a decade investigating this guy.
And they didn't even put his CIA handlers on the stand. That would have been a whole nother set.
The combined testimony of the witnesses was devastating. They described how for nearly 30 years, Guzman moved tons of drugs from Central America to Mexico, then to the United States and Canada, through a mind-boggling variety of methods, including speedboats, tuna fishing boats, carbon fiber airplanes designed to evade radar, helicopters, passenger cars, cargo trains, semi-submersible submarines, tractor-trailers packed with cans of jalapenos, and yet another tunnel.
What do you do with a submarine that's only semi-submersible? You can submerge it halfway?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't think I'd want a semi-submersible submarine. If I'm going to get in a submarine, I want it to be fully completely submersible.
But does that mean it's
certified to high depth or low depth? I'm not sure how you're supposed, but certified to
underwater.
A lot of depth, a lot of pressure.
Does that mean it's like a boat and it's only partly underwater? Or does that mean you can't go all the way that you could down as you could go with a regular submarine?
It's not clear.
Because I feel like the second one makes more sense.
It seems like it, but then why would they call it semi-submersible? Because if it's submersible, like Rich is saying, it would go completely underwater.
Right.
The witnesses also accused the crime lord of paying off almost every level of the Mexican police, military, and political establishment, including an alleged $100 million bribe to one of the country's former presidents, Enrique Peña Nieto. Mr. Guzman was said to have ordered the deaths of dozens of his rivals, enemies, and informants, and to have armed himself with a gold-plated AK-47. That
you got
sounds
the government
pretty
on
sweet.
your payroll. What do you got to worry about your informants for?
A camouflage-patterned M16 and at least 3 diamond-encrusted pistols, one with his initials on the handle.
I wish people would quit doing that. Like, a gun is not for decoration.
If you've got $1 billion, then yes, it is.
But why? Like, you still have,
Because you can.
Why not?
because it's going to mess up the function of a gun. Either
Having
you're
diamonds on
grabbing stabby diamonds, or you have diamonds getting stuck in your side.
He personally killed, they say, at least 3 people and ordered his men to bury one of them alive and dispose of the other 2 bodies in a bonfire. Beyond helping prosecutors substantiate the 11 counts in Mr. Guzman's indictment, witnesses painted a complicated portrait of the man himself. They told jurors how he rose from being a poor campesino in the village of La Tuna in the Sierra Madre Mountains to become a billionaire narco lord with a $10 million beach house, a fleet of private jets, a yacht that he named for himself, and a personal zoo. By the end of the government's case, jurors had heard stories about Guzman's temper, his grace under pressure, bottomless libido, workaholic nature, and the love of the limelight and obsession with spying on everyone around him. They learned about his failed vanity.
That's not an obsession. That's good security.
Well, right, because you never know when your right-hand man is going to turn against you.
It's not paranoia when they're really out to get you.
Exactly. They learned about his failed vanity movie project and even got to see a video of his underwear drawer.
Why? Why do we need that?
I don't know.
Unnecessary.
Prosecutors were able to assemble all of this because many have been working on the Guzman case
Because prosecutors like taking pictures of weird stuff.
For a decade or more. Well before the Kingpin was extradited from Mexico 2 years ago to stand trial in New York, he was already facing 6 separate indictments filed in 6 separate federal judicial districts. As one of the world's biggest drug traffickers, Guzman presented a unique target, and with some notable exceptions, building one of the world's biggest drug trafficking cases against him required a unique level of collaboration. Then they go on to rattle off the various government agencies that worked on this particular case. So just absolutely, interesting case. He has, by the way, informed the judge that he will not be taking the stand. So the prosecution has rested as of today. Defense will begin and talk about a tough client to defend in this case. This is going to be would be very interesting to watch this particular case. In fact, there was another story about apparently there's an actor who portrays him in some series called Narcos, which I'm not familiar with.
It's a good series. I like it.
So it's based on reality, is the idea?
Yeah, the part I saw was season 1, which goes which talks about Escobar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen the meme that they use of the guy sitting all alone on a swing set. That's a picture of Escobar from Narcos.
No, I didn't know that.
Okay.
And then so I guess the actor who portrays El Chapo in that series came to his trial today, and apparently El Chapo was happy about it. He waved at him and was happy to see that the actor who portrays him had come out to watch the trial.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.